You ever see a bride's grandmother, in heels, holding a champagne glass, do a slow-motion slip and slide across a muddy lawn, like she's auditioning for a stunt double role in an action movie? I have. And as surreal and hilarious as it was, that moment was just the climax of a story that had been brewing long before the wedding bells even rang. It all started with a decision made not by me, not by a committee, but by one woman who believed the world revolved around her clipboard and her cursive handwriting. My neighbor, Karen. You see, Karen didn't just overstep boundaries. She stomped over them in heels, with the confidence of a woman who had never been told no in her life. She decided, without asking, that my front lawn, my private, green, carefully manicured sanctuary, was going to be used as public parking for her daughter's wedding. No note, no knock on the door. Just printed signs, a mass message to guests, and directions that guided cars right onto my grass, like it was an official event lot. She told everyone it was totally fine, that her generous neighbor had offered up his lawn in the spirit of community. Generous. I didn't even know about it until white folding chairs started appearing like mushrooms after rain and pink ribbons showed up tied to my fence like a toddler's birthday party was about to begin. What none of them knew, and what Karen was about to learn the hard way, was that I had already taken precautions. Months ago, in preparation for a possible uptick in foot traffic due to a local event, I had installed industrial-grade, motion-activated sprinklers. Not your average garden hose attachment, the kind you pick up at a dollar store and forget in the sun. No, these were the kind of systems designed to keep deer out of orchards and raccoons out of cornfields. They were programmed to detect any movement on my lawn and react instantly with high-pressure streams of water capable of soaking someone head to toe before they had time to curse. So when Karen decided to sacrifice my lawn for her wedding dreams, she wasn't walking into a quiet little turf battle. She was stepping into a perfectly calibrated no-parking war zone. And the best part? I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to argue. I simply sat back, leaned into my lawn chair, popcorn in hand, and waited for the show to begin. But to understand just how satisfying it all was, you need to rewind to the week before everything unraveled. At that time, life on the block was unusually calm. My lawn was my pride and joy, an emerald masterpiece that I had treated with the kind of love most people reserve for antique cars or vintage wine. I had aerated it each spring, fertilized it on schedule, fought off weeds with organic treatments, and even bought specialty grass seed that promised a richer shade of green than the standard mix. Neighbors often slowed their walk to admire it. Some even asked for my secret. Every blade of grass felt like a little soldier standing at attention, a monument to patience and care. Then it started happening. First, a random sedan parked too close to the edge of the lawn. No big deal, I thought. Maybe someone had friends over. Then a couple more cars appeared. A large SUV with balloons on the back window. A minivan that leaked oil and made suspicious creaking noises parked just a bit too far onto the curb, right beside one of my sprinkler valve covers. I felt an itch of irritation, but still didn't suspect the storm brewing beneath the surface. Then came the chairs, folding chairs, lined up along the sidewalk like a front row seat to some invisible performance. Next came the ribbons, white and satin, tied in little bows along my fence posts. That was the moment something clicked. Confused, I walked down the street, rounded the corner, and there it was. A laminated sign zip-tied to a light post, catching the sun like it wanted to be seen from space. In looping, unmistakably Karen handwriting, it read, "Wedding parking, courtesy of a generous neighbor." I stood there in disbelief, reading it twice to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. But no, it was real. And there, across the street, was Karen, sipping something pink out of a wine glass, chattering loudly on her phone and laughing like she didn't just declare eminent domain over my property. I marched over, sign in hand, veins buzzing. She turned, saw me, and smiled like I was the rude one. "It's just for one afternoon," she said in that sing-song voice of hers. "Think of the community spirit." Community spirit. I was seeing red. "It's not like you're using it for anything important," she added, as if my years of lawn care were meaningless compared to her daughter's Pinterest-perfect wedding vision. I told her flatly that it was my property and not available for parking. That should have been the end of it. But Karen doubled down. "You're being so rigid," she huffed. "We all make sacrifices." Sacrifices. She hadn't made a single one. So the next day, I put up signs, big, bold ones in red and black that screamed, "Private property, no parking." I staked them into the ground at the edges of my lawn, like I was planting flags in enemy territory. The next morning, they were gone. Vanished. My security footage later revealed Karen herself, casually peeling them off and stuffing them into a plastic grocery bag, like she was tidying up rogue litter. The audacity was Olympic level. I reported it to the HOA with photos and messages. Their response? "We'll look into it." Which, in HOA speak, means Karen's scary and we're not getting involved. That's when I knew. If help wasn't coming, I would have to handle this myself. Not with more signs, not with angry confrontation. No, I would respond with the cold, pressurized clarity of water. I returned to the garden center, this time with a mission. I wandered the aisles like a man possessed, eyes scanning for tools of irrigation warfare. That's when I found them, the sprinklers. Not the kind that spin in lazy circles. These had names like Hydroblaster and Tornado Guard. They promised full coverage, multi-nozzle, motion-triggered power. The kind of sprinklers that don't ask questions, they act. A worker in a neon vest caught me staring and said, "Trying to scare raccoons?" I looked him dead in the eye and replied, "Karen." He chuckled and said, "Then you'll want the triple nuzzle with night mode." I bought 4. That evening, I transformed into a tactical lawn operator. Crawling through the grass on hands and knees, I positioned the sprinkler heads like landmines. Motion sensors wired in, water pressure set to maximum discomfort, and a toggle switch in my pocket to override manually if needed. I ran test after test using an old gnome as my stand-in wedding guest. Every time it hit the grass, a spray erupted with a satisfying hiss, launching it into the flower bed. My yard wasn't a lawn anymore. It was a fortress. A beautifully innocent, green-trimmed trap, ready to spring into action. By morning, everything was back in place. Sprinkler heads buried, hoses hidden, grass looking untouched. Karen walked by, smug as ever, wearing a shirt that read, "Mother of the Bride." She glanced at the lawn, smiled sweetly and said, "Thanks again for being so cooperative. It really shows your character." I took a sip of my coffee and replied, "Oh, I think everyone will enjoy the show." She didn't catch the warning, but the countdown had begun. Wedding day was coming, and Karen had no idea what was waiting for her. At exactly 8 a.m. on the big day, the first signs of chaos slithered in. A white van decorated with pink ribbons pulled up and parked, half on the street, half directly on my grass. The driver stepped out, stretched like he owned the place, and casually backed into the lawn. I clicked the remote. Hiss, thwack. A single perfectly aimed stream of high-pressure water launched beneath the van and smacked him right in the back. The man screamed, flailing as if ice water had crawled down his spine, and spun around in panic. The sprinkler rotated smoothly, tracking him, dousing his legs, and soaking his pants in seconds. He stumbled, slipped, and fell onto the driveway with a wet thud. Still, he didn't leave. No, he glared at the lawn like it had insulted his mother and pulled the van forward to park on the street instead. One battle down, many to go. By 10 a.m., guests began arriving in droves. You could tell this wedding was aiming for high Instagram value. Floral prints, tailored suits, pastel dresses, sun hats, polished shoes. The kind of outfits that scream, "I expect to walk on red carpet, not sod." Karen had gone all out. She'd printed new signs, this time with pink arrows and balloons, and tied one right next to my mailbox, trying to make it look official. Then came the first real group to challenge the lawn. 4 older women in matching wide-brimmed hats and delicate gloves stepped out of an SUV and onto the grass, smiling and chatting, until the sprinklers roared to life. 4 jets fired in perfect sequence. One hit a shoulder, another blasted feet, one landed squarely on a chest. They shrieked and ran for cover, waving their arms like startled birds. Hats flew, gloves flopped, and one woman yelled, "My blouse is silk!" as she scrambled to yank open the SUV door. They piled back in, soaked and stunned. From my porch, coffee in hand, I watched the scene unfold like a carefully choreographed ballet. Not because I took joy in their discomfort, but because I had warned Karen, and she had told them it was all fine. That's the thing about ignoring boundaries. It's all fun and games, until the lawn fights back. Around noon, just when the sun hit its brutal peak, and the wet marks on the grass had started to dry into shameful streaks across my once perfect lawn, Karen finally made her grand entrance. Dressed like she was about to walk the red carpet at a wedding-themed fashion gala, she strutted down the street flanked by bridesmaids, photographers, and what I assume was her last remaining grip on reality. Her outfit was a symphony of lace, sequins, and smug entitlement. Her heels clicked against the sidewalk, like punctuation marks in a sentence that read, "This day is all about me." She scanned the area, probably expecting her plan to be unfolding smoothly. But what greeted her instead were damp, confused guests, wandering around like they'd just escaped a car wash. Shoes in their hands, makeup smeared, hair wilted from the earlier sprinkler ambushes. Her smile faltered only slightly as she looked across my lawn and noticed the clear, wet stripes from the morning assaults. But instead of backing off or redirecting her guests like a sane person might, she marched straight toward my yard, gesturing for one of the photographers to follow her. That was her mistake. She took one confident step onto the grass, and that's when I triggered the manual override. The sprinkler nearest her hissed like a viper and exploded with a jet of water so forceful it carved a perfect arc in front of her foot. She froze, startled, one heel suspended mid-step. Then she lost balance. Her foot landed squarely into a soft, muddy patch created by the earlier waves of trespassers. With a squelch loud enough to echo, her designer heel sank, and she let out a high-pitched shriek as she tumbled backward, flailing for something to hold on to. The photographer, to his credit, kept snapping away, either out of professionalism or sheer shock, capturing each glorious second. Karen turned on him, screeching at him to stop taking pictures, but it was too late. Her fall, her scream, the look of horror on her face, it was all immortalized in stunning clarity. She yanked her foot free, leaving the expensive heel behind, and stomped one barefooted back to the sidewalk, her hair frizzing from the earlier spray, her blouse clinging to her back. Her rage bubbled so fiercely that when she stormed up my driveway and pounded on my door like she was about to deliver divine judgment, it was almost theatrical. She banged again, then again. But instead of opening the door, I let my little pre-installed speaker deliver the message I'd prepared. "This is private property. You have been recorded. Please leave the premises." She froze, processing what just happened. Her jaw dropped, eyes wide, as she scanned for the voice's source. When she couldn't find it, she screamed, "You're ruining everything!" and stomped away, still clutching her muddy heel like it was a trophy from a war she was rapidly losing. Guests nearby had stopped pretending not to notice. They were whispering now, glancing at each other. One man muttered to his wife, "Did she really not get permission for this?" His wife shook her head and replied, "Karen never asks. She just takes." It was the perfect summary of everything unfolding. As the wedding ceremony drew closer, desperation oozed into the crowd like humidity. People were trying to sneak onto the lawn now, hoping the sprinklers had been turned off. They hadn't. One couple tried to sneak guests through the alley behind my house, parking behind the fence and tiptoeing toward the side yard. But I'd thought of that too. The moment a young woman holding a baby crossed the side grass, the hidden sprinkler shot up and fired at her feet. She screamed, leapt back, and almost dropped the diaper bag, which took the full hit. Her husband, in a panic, grabbed her and the baby and stumbled back to their car like they'd been caught in enemy territory. Then came the news crew. A local neighborhood reporter had been tipped off, by whom, I'll let you guess, and arrived with a camera and notebook. She wasted no time interviewing soggy guests, filming B-roll of scattered umbrellas, ruined dresses, and confused attendees. When she asked Karen for a statement, Karen exploded. She yelled about sabotage, about betrayal, about how I'd turned a beautiful day into a disaster. Then she called the police. And here's where it really got good. The police arrived calmly, not guns blazing, but with the tired look of officers who'd seen far too many suburban dramas. Karen tried to explain that I had set traps, that I had assaulted her guests with weaponized irrigation, and that this was now a criminal offense. The officer raised a brow and asked one simple question. "Do you have written permission from your neighbor to use his lawn?" Karen blinked. She stammered. She said, "Well, it was implied." The officer nodded slowly and said, "You're lucky he hasn't filed trespassing charges." She was speechless. Utterly, gloriously speechless. Then the officer walked over to me, extended a hand and said, "Honestly, that's the most peaceful conflict resolution I've seen all week." By evening, the wedding had turned into a soggy circus. Guests loitered on the sidewalk, like dazed festival goers after the power's gone out. Some tried to sip lukewarm champagne. Others shuffled around, avoiding eye contact with the bride, whose bouquet now drooped like a forgotten salad. Karen was soaked, both literally and socially. Her reputation had been shredded by every sprinkler head on my lawn, and I hadn't raised my voice, called a lawyer, or moved from my porch. The lawn did all the talking. The next morning brought silence. My phone, however, did not share that silence. It buzzed non-stop with messages, memes and screenshots from neighbors, friends, even a few strangers. Someone had captured Karen mid-scream with her shoe off, mascara dripping, and labeled it, "When the sprinkler system respects boundaries more than your neighbor." It went mini-viral in the local Facebook group. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The neighborhood was already handling the commentary. What I did instead was walk outside, stretch, and take in the sight of my lawn. Despite the chaos, it had held up beautifully. A few patches were muddy, sure, and one sprinkler head was slightly tilted like a soldier who'd seen battle, but overall, it was still green, still proud, still victorious. It didn't take long before the HOA sent out an emergency meeting notice. Normally, these things were dull affairs held in someone's garage with lukewarm coffee and folding chairs, but this one was serious. The subject line screamed in bold capital letters, "Meeting required, yesterday's incident and liability." That alone told me Karen had gone nuclear. When I showed up 5 minutes early, the clubhouse was already buzzing with tension. Karen sat at the far end, arms folded, jaw locked so tight you could practically hear her molars grind. The rest of the board looked like they were attending a daytime soap opera, some curious, some amused, some already annoyed. Karen launched into her tirade the moment the meeting began. She accused me of sabotage, of using dangerous technology, of humiliating her daughter on her wedding day. She demanded I be fined, warned, and punished for creating a hostile environment. The room went quiet. Bob, the HOA president, cleared his throat and asked, "Do you have anything to say?" I opened my folder, slid forward a stack of printed evidence, photos of my warning signs, timestamps from the videos, screenshots from her messages offering my lawn to her guests, and even the receipt for the sprinkler system purchase. Bob looked them over, then passed them down the table. A board member named Cheryl stared at Karen and asked, "Did you really offer his lawn without permission?" Karen's eyes narrowed. "It was implied," she snapped. "He didn't say no fast enough." Cheryl blinked. "That's not how property works, Karen." The turning point came when I played a short audio clip, a guest stepping onto the lawn, sprinklers firing, and Karen's voice in the background yelling, "Ignore the signs, just park." That hit like a thunderclap. Even the most neutral board members leaned back, eyes wide. Bob sighed and finally said, "Karen, not only did you ignore posted signage, but you actively encouraged others to trespass. And now you're asking us to punish him." Karen opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Then Amir, the quietest board member, the one who only ever spoke about landscaping, flipped open the HOA bylaws and read aloud, "Violations of private property, unauthorized events, liability clauses." "Karen," he said, "you violated every one of these." Bob turned to me and asked, "Do you have an estimate for damages?" I handed him a typed invoice. Garden border repair, grass reseeding, water costs, and for flavor, one line item titled, "Emotional distress to household cat, startled by sprinkler activations." Bob chuckled, but said, "We'll take this into account when calculating her fines." Karen practically levitated from her chair. "You're fining me?" she screeched. "Yes," Bob replied, "and you'll be writing a public apology in the next HOA newsletter. Any further complaints, and we'll suspend your voting privileges." Karen stormed out, slamming the doors so hard a framed picture rattled on the wall. The meeting shifted instantly. Neighbors started swapping Karen stories, how she trimmed someone's hedges without permission, how she stole flower pots, how she once yelled at the recycling guy for misplacing her bin. It all poured out like a flood. No one had ever challenged her. But now that someone had, the entire block was ready to push back. When I left, people clapped me on the back and joked about installing their own sprinkler systems. One neighbor even suggested linking them together across properties like a neighborhood defense grid. Over the next few days, things changed. Cheryl stopped by with official confirmation. Karen had been fined. The HOA was rewriting the rules to prevent any future unauthorized use of private property. She laughed and said, "By the way, that cat line, it's going in the newsletter." That night, I sat on my porch, sipping coffee. The neighborhood bathed in a quiet golden glow. Karen's house was dark. No lights, no music, no movement. It was like peace had finally returned to the street. And as I looked over my now famous lawn, swaying gently in the breeze like a war hero at ease, I raised my mug to it and whispered, "Victory." But the story didn't end there. What happened next? Well, let's just say it cemented the legend. Because a few weeks later, Karen's daughter and her new husband moved back in. Honeymoon? Cancelled. Newlywed bliss? Drenched and defeated. And from the looks on their faces, they knew exactly why. The bride looked like she wanted to evaporate into the concrete. And Karen? She'd lost something far more valuable than control. She lost the one thing she prized above all else: attention.